And welcome back to All Business Media TV. I'm your host, Rick Delgado, and welcoming back to the studio is a lovely lady who's usually in Birmingham, Alabama, but right now she's with us here in New York. Her name is Kathie Condon. She's the owner at Condon Medical Legal Consultants. You can find her online at cmlc.co or give her a call directly at 205-908-3289. And again, Kathie, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back in the area.
Yeah, and again, you know, you've been with us before, but, you know, there's always people, you know, watching our shows for the first time who've never seen you. So why don't you do us a favor? Tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you do at Condon Legal Medical Consultants.
Well, I'm a registered nurse and have been for over 30 years. And in 1999, I found out that there was a need for chart reviews for attorneys who were doing medical malpractice, personal injury type cases.
Right.
And I started doing that, took it to a full-blown business in 2002. And so I'm sort of like the conduit between the medical community and the legal community.
Right.
I take the medical records that the attorney has and interpret those things for him. And I look for things like, were the records tampered with? And that has happened in the past. You know, I look for things where either nurses made mistakes or doctors made mistakes,
right,
and it was harmful to the patient. So a lot of times an attorney will get a case and he really doesn't know if he should pursue it or not. So I will review that case, and then I take it and tell him, in my nursing opinion, what he should do with the case.
Right.
Now, it's up to the attorney to decide if he wants to pursue it or not, but I give him my nursing opinion of all these many years of nursing practice in doctors' offices and hospitals.
Right. And how many years of nursing experience do you have?
I have over 30. If I told you, you'd know how old I was. But
so you come at this from, you know, a long-standing career in the medical field, and now you've kind of, like you said, you're the conduit, you're the go-between between the medical and the legal community. Because let's face it, you know, as someone who's not in either, I can look at somebody like you and go, I don't know what you people talk about, or you know, I'll see you jot something down. What does that mean? To you, it might mean something. To me, it means nothing. So I'm sure to a lawyer who's got to decipher, you know, these medical records, that's not their expertise. That's not what they're good at. They're good at the law.
Well, and the thing of it is, a lot of the attorneys that do a lot of medical malpractice, personal injury, they've gotten fairly good over the years at, you know, interpreting a lot of things, but there's still things that they run upon that they're just like clueless as to what it really, really means. So that's where I come in, is to pull those pieces out and interpret them to where it's something they can understand, because my thing is, you take care of the legal side, I'll help you understand the medical side.
Right. And again, you know, when you're dealing with the different types of jargon, each you know, each profession has their own little, you know, the way they talk, things mean certain things. Like you said, you know, you're looking at a chart, you can make that determination. Okay, they got this, and this treatment. You'll know by looking at it if that was unnecessary or if that should not have been coupled with something else, to know that there's going to be a reaction that could have potentially caused a problem.
Oh,
right?
yes, yes. And you know, medicine has their jargon. Nursing has we have our own jargon. Then you've got respiratory therapists who have their own jargon.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, and then you've got physical therapists that have their own jargon. So, you know, as a nurse, I have to know everybody's jargon.
Right.
So, you know, when I'm at the hospital working, I'm looking at a chart and I'm thinking, you know, wonder what respiratory therapy did with this, and I'm flipping back, and I have to interpret their notes so I'll know what's gone on with that patient at the time I wasn't in the hospital working.
Right. Now, what about, you know, take me back to that first time that you got exposed to this. When was that? You said 1999?
Yes, 99.
Now, was that because somebody, you know, stepped up and said, you know what, can you help me make sense of this? Or was it, did somebody, you know, specifically ask you to put together some notes for a case?
Well, it's sort of a funny story. I had been to a seminar about doing legal nurse consulting.
Oh, okay.
And a couple of days later, I was at the beauty shop, and I was telling my beautician, you know, about this conference and all. And the lady sitting in the next chair was the wife of an attorney in town. And she said, "Excuse me, I'm sorry I was listening, but my husband is an attorney, and he has a case that he needs an RN to give a thought or two, because it's a guy who suffered a heart attack.
Right.
And he doesn't really know if he has a case or not." And she said, can you call him? And I said, "Sure, I'll be glad to." So I called him, he gave me the case, and that's how the whole thing started.
Look at that. So simply overhearing someone,
Yes.
you explaining to somebody what you were looking into, kind of led you down this road. You know, what is it, 18, 19 years later, you got a full-blown business.
Right, exactly.
That's amazing.
Exactly.
That's great. It's one of those things where, again, you know, how did you find out about this seminar, first off? Because I had never even, until we talked for the first time, Kathie, I didn't even know this stuff existed.
Right. Well, as a nurse, I have to have continuing education hours. So I was looking for some extra hours, you know, because we have to have it to renew our license every 2 years. And I saw this and I thought, well, this sounds pretty good. And it was reasonably priced, because you don't get something for nothing. So I sent in my money and went to the seminar that day.
And that's how it started.
Yes, that's how the whole thing started. But there's a whole bunch of us out there. We have our own professional organization.
Right.
We also are recognized as a subspecialty of nursing now, and you can have an extra validation as a legal nurse consultant, but you have to have practiced 200 hours, and you have to sit for an exam. So it's sort of like a lawyer taking the bar.
I was going to say, it's almost like, so you're getting accredited? Is that what it's considered?
Right. You don't have to have that accreditation, but for me to be able to look at an attorney and say, you know, I have this accreditation which proves that, you know, I've taken the exam, I passed the exam, and it's all types of cases that they give you on the exam to see if you know what you're talking about.
Right. All right. Well, that's, you know what, that's interesting, because again, you know, there's a lot of times where these things come into play and you don't even know, like take for instance the woman that introduced you to her husband, the first attorney.
Right.
He probably had nobody. He's like, I don't know how to make heads or tails of
Right.
this.
He didn't know anybody to call.
Right.
And when she overheard that, she thought, well, this is a great opportunity for me to help him out in his business. And then I helped him make a decision about this case, whether he should take it or not.
And do you remember what your recommendation? I mean, it was your first case here, Kath. Usually the first case everybody remembers. Yes,
it was my first case. And after reading through the chart, I told him it really wasn't a good case. He had a lot of pre-existing conditions that a heart attack was going to happen to him at some point in time. He wanted to blame it on, you know, poor medical care.
Right.
When really it wasn't. When I look back at his office visits with his doctor kept telling him, if you don't make these changes in your life, you're going to have a heart attack.
Right.
But he didn't believe it, or either he chose not to listen.
Yeah.
So I told the attorney, there's not a case here, because the other side, the doctor's lawyer, is going to say, but he was told, it's here charted in the chart.
Right.
He was told, and he chose the path he wanted to take, and that's why he had a heart attack.
Wow. Look at that. So all the way from those humble beginnings.
That's right.
And now let me ask you, are you, because of where you're located in Birmingham, Alabama, are you restricted to working in just in Birmingham, or can you work with anybody in any state, or are there certain states you're not allowed to work in? How does that whole thing work?
I can work with anybody in any state.
Okay.
And you know, we just don't deal with paper charts anymore. Everything's electronic now. So attorneys send me cases, and they send it to a program that we all have, and it drops the program in there.
Okay.
And then I just pull it up at home on my computer and read it off the computer screen. And I have, you know, like 3 monitors. And I have one monitor that just has the case on it. Then I have another monitor that has my notes as I'm looking at the case. And then the third monitor I just have in case I'm doing research at the same time. Then my research is on this third monitor as I'm going through the case. And that's something I can give the attorney, is the information about where I got my opinions from, because a lot of times they want to know, well, how did you come up with this idea? Right. Well, it's not my idea. It came from, you know, research that somebody has done.
Right. And so when you're doing something like that, you know, you're putting together, you know, say you're working on a case for an attorney. Mm-hmm. And I know you've mentioned you kind of put together a presentation for them, so everything is laid out, timeline, you know.
Yes.
Do you include those things that they can refer to, like according to this previous case or this previous, here's what was found as per the research?
No, if they have programs that they can pull up previous cases like theirs. Okay. What I'm doing is giving them the medical research that supports my nursing opinion.
Right.
And and they like to know that. The other thing research helps us do is find experts. People who have written these articles are considered experts. Right. And a lot of times if we're looking for experts, we can go back to the research that I've found and contact these people to see if they would be willing to be the expert on the case.
All right, well that's interesting. So it's almost like footnotes, like when you're writing a paper.
Yes, I never thought of that, but yes, you're right.
All right, well that makes it a little more easier. For, again, most people not in the medical or the legal profession would have trouble understanding, but when you start laying it out like that, like you said, you're going to go through and kind of set up a timeline. Does that include charts and pictures and stuff like that if necessary?
Oh yeah, if I need to put a illustration in there about a certain type of wound or, you know, broken bone or something, I can pull that information off and insert it into my presentation. Have
you ever used video for a presentation?
I haven't, but I have some friends that have used videos.
Oh, yeah?
Yes. It's sort of like a day in the life videos. And they go and they bring in a film crew and they film what it's like for this person in their life now since they had this injury or medical malpractice thing happen to them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it's very compelling evidence.
I would assume so, because that's going to be powerful.
Yeah. Now, I do know of a workers' comp case one time. This lady injured her neck on the job. And so she was taking time off. You know, they gave her the time off. The workers' comp doc said, oh man, this is a really bad injury.
Right.
Well, you know, the attorney had reviewed the case and he couldn't decide what was going on with this lady. So he had hired private detectives to follow her around.
That's where this gets juicy, Kathie.
Yes, because they were parked outside her house on a Saturday morning, and they saw her bounce outside, pick up her mail, bend over and pick up the paper, didn't seem to have any problem. About an hour later, she and her 3 kids came out. They got in the car. Now, the lady was supposed to be wearing this neck brace, neck collar thing, and she didn't have it on. So she takes off with the kids. Well, the private detective followed her, and she went to something like Six Flags over Georgia or something. I think it was in Texas, actually. But anyway, she went there. The private detective parked. He got out. He followed him around. She got on the roller coaster. She not only rode the roller coaster once, she rode it 5 times with her kids. Now, a roller coaster, if you've got a neck injury or even a back injury, roller coaster's the worst thing you can get on.
Right.
And so, you know, this guy was filming all this, and you know, with cell phones now, you know, you can hold it up like you're talking on it, but you're actually filming somebody. So he went back He downloaded all this information, sent it to the Workers' Comp Bureau and the Workers' Comp docs. And when they saw it, they're like, no, she's not as bad off as she says she is.
Wow.
So they, contacted her the next week and told her, your workers' comp is going to be cut off in X number of hours and you need to go back to work. And she said, oh, but I'm so, this neck injury. And they said, we had a private detective follow you. We know you went to Six Flags over Texas. We saw you ride the roller coaster 5 times with your kids. And they said, you're not injured if you can get on a roller coaster and then you get off and walk back around to the line and go back again.
Right.
So,
Let me guess, she didn't fight it much after that conversation.
No, she didn't. She didn't have a leg to stand on after that.
Dang.
So I've been called into child custody cases where...
Oh, really?
Yes, because the spouse that wants custody is a good, upstanding person, but they're trying to take custody from the other spouse. Well, the other spouse is a drug addict or, something. Usually it's drug addiction in these days.
Right.
And so, we're trying to prove that the spouse has a problem. And so we'll pull pharmacy records, medical records. And just because you have a prescription for a painkiller doesn't necessarily mean you're not taking it for something other than pain.
Right.
We've seen a lot of people take narcotics from the dentist because I've got this toothache. Well, why aren't you doing something about the tooth if you've got this toothache? Why do you need a prescription for narcotics every 30 days?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
So,
and again, that falls into the, I guess, the realm or the spectrum of your business.
Right.
That you can help kind of point the lawyers, be like, look, here's what we've got. Here's what this does. Here's the reactions from that medicine, this medicine, and you can kind of all tie it all together for them.
Yes.
So they can make their arguments.
Yeah, and when we're talking about custody issues, we're talking about divorce lawyers as a rule.
Right.
So, they are clueless about all this medical jargon, and they don't even really know where to start with getting medical records on people.
Wow.
So that's something I do every day, and it's not a big deal for me. I know what I need to do. I know what kind of forms I need to get the medical records, and I know where to go looking for them.
Right.
Those attorneys just have no clue.
Do you ever have an issue with people trying to hide records?
Oh, sure.
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Oh, geez.
That's not unusual at all. So, yeah, and you would think in this day of now, when we charted by hand,
right,
it was real easy. You could really pick out where somebody had torn out a page and rewritten everything.
Right.
And so that was much easier. Or you would know, okay, you'd miss a couple of days in a chart, and you're like, well, where are these couple of days? And medical records department says, well, we don't know. They were in there.
Right.
Well, no, they're not in there. So that's easy enough. But with electronic medical records, it looks like, everything's there, but, there is a way to go back and change electronic medical records and make it look like the person who originally charted it thought of something different and went back and recharted it.
Right.
But the thing of it is, when a person signs on to a computer terminal at the hospital, their unique code goes in, and it shows on a whole extra bunch of paperwork that we have to request.
Right.
Who went in, what time they went into it, and what they changed.
Really? It breaks it down even that much to tell you where in the chart they changed it? And does it tell you what was there beforehand and what they changed it to?
Yes, it does. And, the people don't really understand that piece.
Right.
And it tells you where they were located when they signed in. Like, a lot of doctors now have access to the records from home. So if they go in and start changing records
at home at 2 in the morning, right?
Yeah,
it kind of shows up.
It shows up that oh, they were at home. Well, you know, did it just dawn on them in the middle of the night that they needed to go change this? And
yeah, and that's something you can help the attorneys figure out as well, because you know where to look for it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Again, we're talking with our guest, Kathie Condon. She is the owner at Condon Medical Legal Consultants, based out of Birmingham, Alabama. CMLC.co is her website, or give her a call directly, especially if you're an attorney and you're looking for some help on a case that involves medicine, medical malpractice, what have you. 205-908-3289. We do have some questions that came in online, because we do talk occasionally on the radio as well.
Yes,
Kathie.
okay.
I have a printout of some of those here, and I figure we'll go through some of these questions and see what people have to ask Kathie Condon, shall we?
Okay, we shall.
First one comes from Thomas A, who's checking in from Framingham, Massachusetts. His question is, have you ever come across a case that involves something you've never dealt with before, and how would you handle it? Okay, well, that's I'm not sure in terms of, you know, maybe it's a particular medical issue that you've never dealt with before?
Yes, it could be. And one of the first things I do is I'm going to look at it to see, okay, if I haven't dealt with it, how can I look at this case and see what's going on?
Right.
And in nursing, we're taught what's called the nursing process, which the first thing we do is, you know, evaluate the information.
Right.
Sort of like an assessment. Like when I go in to see a patient, I do an assessment of them. I look at their eyes, I feel their skin, I take their vital signs.
Right.
So I'm assessing the patient. Well, that's what I'm going to do with this chart. I'm going to assess the chart. And then the next thing I do is a planning stage. How are we going to handle this?
Right.
Now, with nursing, a lot of things, you know, I've heard about, I may not have done them, but I have a large group of colleagues that are more than happy to answer questions that I may have.
Right.
If I just feel like it's so far over my head that I don't know what to do with it, I will subcontract it out to someone who has that knowledge. Wound care is a big one. Now, I have done some wound care cases, but you know, they didn't involve a whole lot. It was just sort of a straightforward, what I call a straightforward wound care case.
Right.
But sometimes it gets so involved with these wounds, especially in nursing homes, that it just sort of goes over my head.
Right.
So in addition to maybe looking at, my next plan is find somebody that's a wound care nurse, and they have their own little group of people. They're certified in wound care.
Right.
I'll find somebody that I know, and I will subcontract it out to them and let them make the decision. And then I turn around and go to the attorney and say, okay, here's my wound care nurse, and this was her opinion on this case, and after reviewing it, I agree.
Right.
Now, another thing I have to do is I have to keep up with the trends in the medical world. So I go to seminars that are about things like wound care. Wound care changes. They find better, newer and better ways to treat wounds. Mm-hmm. So anytime there's a seminar about wound care, I go to listen to it, because that is one area of nursing that changes.
Now, why does that area of nursing change so much? Is it because technology? Is it medicine that's coming out that's better, or they're finding different ways to maybe treat certain types of wounds? Is that it?
Yes. It's a little bit of everything. The technology has definitely changed. The treatment of wounds has definitely changed, and there are newer and better medicines. Now, when I was what we call a baby nurse, which is, I didn't nurse babies, I was just new.
Right.
We would treat like bed sores about the only thing we had was some ointments to put on them. If we were trying to make them heal up better, we would do what they call wet to dry dressings. We'd put the dressings on and soak it in sterile water and then cover it. And then 12 hours later, we'd go back, take all that off because of that gauze is dried up.
Right.
And then we'd do it again. And that would help the wound to heal. But nowadays, they have technology that there is what's called a wound vac now. It's a big sponge-like that has suction attached to it.
I think I'm going to get grossed out here, Kathie.
No,
Go ahead.
I won't. Gross out. But anyway, we put that on. It's only changed like every 3 to 4 days, but it keeps the wound clean and dry, and it helps that wound. It really makes some miraculous things with that wound as far as healing goes.
Right.
There's newer and better medications out there that we can put on wounds. Along with newer and better medications, of course, comes cost.
Right.
And that's the one thing that, you know, the wound care nurses look at because they know the cost better than I do. And they decide, okay, is it worth it to have this tube of ointment that costs $2,000?
Right.
As opposed to this other tube of ointment that we've been using for 100 years that's only going to cost $60. And they have to make that determination because a lot of people can't afford all these medications. Not everybody has health insurance.
Right.
A lot of people end up paying a lot more out of pocket than, say, you do or I do.
Yeah. Even the ones that do have health insurance,
Well,
there's a lot of
yeah.
things that won't end up being covered.
Right.
Unfortunately.
So, you know, it's just the difference in night and day from when I started nursing as to what's going on now in the wound care field.
Right. Now, since we touched on a little bit on insurance there, has that been something where you've gotten involved in with cases that, you know, maybe a patient deciding, you know what, I'm not happy with the way my insurance company's taking care of things. They hired a lawyer. The lawyer says, come through here, take a look at all these records, make sure that they're paying what they're supposed to. Because a lot of times, you know, you'll get these letters. You're like, oh, your claim's been denied, but they won't really want to explain why. Have you found that part something you're getting involved with your business?
Yes, I have. One thing is, if the insurance company, say, was charged for like 5 IV start kits,
right,
and they were charged all at the same time on the same day within a 30-minute period, the attorney may ask me to come in and evaluate that.
Right.
Well, what I do is we get the medical records and I flip to that page to that date. Now, a good nurse is going to state that she or he tried to start that IV 5 times and didn't have any luck starting the IV. So I can say, okay, that was a case where, you know, that charge is acceptable.
Right.
And then I go and look at what the insurance company typically pays for something like that. Another thing is, say you have a gentleman that's had abdominal surgery, and then his insurance is saying, you know, they only pick up like this minute portion.
Right.
Which and he's read his policy and he says, oh, this is not right. Well, the attorney will get me to come in and look at it. Well, when I'm going down the list of charges, there's a charge for 3 days of intensive care unit in labor and delivery. I think that was charged wrong.
Right.
And I mean, we're talking $2,000 to $3,000 a day.
Right.
And the insurance company's not going to pay that. And they're expecting him to pick that, or the hospital's expecting him to pick up that charge. And I'm like, no, 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 no.
Right.
You know, this is a man. He had abdominal surgery.
Right.
He was not in an intensive care unit in labor and delivery area. So I come in and pull those things out.
All right. Well, that's another, I guess, helpful angle that you provide, you know, again, for the people in the legal side of it.
Right.
To kind of help them discern, okay, here's where your case is. This is something that they're trying to get them to pay or getting charged for. That's not even applicable.
Well, a lot of times attorneys want me to look and see, okay, this patient had this and now this has happened. What are we looking at as far as cost go in the future?
Right.
And that's called a cost projection. And I've been offering that to my clients if they have a case. In fact, I'm working with an attorney down in South Alabama that he has a case that we're looking at how much this young lady's care, it's a long story, but she had something happen to her.
Right.
And now she needs one-on-one care, and there's just a lot of different things going on as a result of this injury she suffered. So he's asked me to come in, make an estimation of how much monies she's going to need going forward.
Right.
And so I've looked at that, I've figured up the cost, and you know, he wants to use that information to decide how much to sue, how much to ask for these people who mistreated this young lady.
Right. Wow.
So yeah, so you know, that was another thing that I can offer attorneys is, you know, if you need to know how much this is going to cost in the future, let me help you with all that information.
Just another part of what you do there,
Right.
Kathie, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, that's good to know. Hey, we've got let's see, our other question, our second question, I should say, is coming from Shana D. from Westchester, New York. She asks, before a trial, have you ever been involved in interviewing a witness or even voir direing the jury?
No, I've never been a part of voir dire of the jury. Now, the attorney may say to me a day or two before the trial, look, what are some of the things that you think I should be asking these jurors,
right,
potential jurors? And I can come up with some questions like, you know, sort of like if you have a death penalty case, you get the people who are potential jurors up there and ask them, well, do you believe in the death penalty?
Right.
Yes or no? And that sort of sets the tone for whether they stay on the jury or not.
Right, and you got one side that's looking for jurors that do, you know, want those people that are not opposed to the death penalty, and of course you got the defense that is like, you know, we don't want any juror.
Right,
that wants to go ahead with the death penalty.
Yeah, so yeah, I haven't been directly involved in picking a jury.
Right.
But
have you ever worked with the attorney, say the attorney's interviewing a witness at his office and is trying to get information and has you come in just to, you know, maybe it's a nurse that's working there and, you know, is part of the lawsuit?
Yes, and I have helped him formulate the questions that he needs to ask her, like in a deposition.
Okay.
When he's, you know, interviewing these people in a formal deposition before trial, and I help come up with questions that they need to be asking to help determine, you know, do they realize they did the right thing or not?
Right.
Why they picked the path they did to treat this patient? Because one example in nursing is something happens with a patient.
Okay.
You use your nursing judgment and you're going to call the doctor and say, okay, this is what's happening with this patient. He says, oh, don't worry about it, and hangs up on you. And that's not unusual. So you think, okay, what do I do next? I don't think I should just leave this be.
Right.
And so you go up what we call the chain of command. You call your nursing supervisor and tell her or him what's going on, and then they make a decision, okay, do we call the doctor back? Do they call the doctor back or not?
Right.
There's always a chief of staff in any hospital, and you know, if they call the physician back and he says, I told Kathie not to worry with that, and slams the phone down on her, then she'll call the chief of staff. We don't care if it's 3 o'clock in the morning or not. You know, you signed up to be a doctor. These things happen.
Yeah.
And so she makes the decision. She's going to the chief of staff. And when she gets to him, that's the end all, because if he says, oh, don't worry about it, that doctor knows what he's doing, then we've done everything as nurses that we can.
Right.
And now the kicker is I'm charting all this down, and then she comes and she charts what she's done too.
Right.
But then, you know, I'm watching that patient like a hawk now.
Right.
Because I know that things are not going to get better, they're probably going to get worse. I can remember when I was a very young nurse, I had a kid that had a tonsillectomy. Now, you know, they tell you tonsillectomy is nothing.
Yeah, it's no big deal, right?
This kid spit up blood all night long.
Oh, wow.
And I kept calling the doctor, and he kept saying, I'll look at him in the morning when I make rounds.
Right.
At 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm looking at how much blood this kid's lost. I'm looking at his vital signs. I've called my nursing supervisor. She's called this doctor back, and he keeps saying, Toby, which was my supervisor, I'll look at this kid when I make rounds in the morning.
Right.
Well, guess what? Of course, we left at 7. And I told the nurse that came and took over the care of this young man, oh, I say young man, he was 8 years old. I said, you know, here's what's been going on with this kid all night long. And here's when I called the doctor, and here's what he said to me. I said, so I hope things, you know, the kid's okay. Well, when he came in about 8:15, and he goes and looks at the kid, and he's like freaking out because this kid's got an active bleeder in the back of his throat.
Right.
He had to take him back up to the OR to cauterize the bleeder, which if he had come in, and they ended up giving this kid a unit of blood. That's how bad he had been bleeding all night long.
Right.
If he had come on in at, you know, I think it was about 1:30 in the morning when I initially realized this kid's spitting up too much blood. If he'd have come on in at that time, cauterized that bleeder, the kid wouldn't have needed any blood. He could have gone home that morning.
Right.
But, you know, that's the chain of command, and that's, you know, where you have to make decisions.
And that's the important part of what you do, is identifying those things.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of used to seeing how it's all laid out and how it's supposed to go. And if you notice that, you know what, this wasn't followed, these people were warned, it ended up with this being the problem.
Yes.
Then of course, you know, that of course bodes well for the attorney who's looking to make a case against the doctor or the hospital in that case.
Right. Right.
All right. Well, that's good to know. And again, you know, we've got some emailed questions for Kathie Condon. We got a few more here. One comes from Buffalo, New York. A person named Jamie says, since you work with attorneys, do you ever get a chance to examine evidence? Like, I guess the medical records, would that be considered evidence in a case?
Yes, that would be considered the evidence in the case. So, and I mean, when you're looking at medical records, it's not just what the doctors and nurses are charting. You've got lab work you have to look at, respiratory therapy notes. If there's been something that's sent to pathology, you have pathology notes to look at.
Right.
X-rays and stuff.
Is there ever any testimony you're asked to kind of watch or, you know, give your opinion on as part of, you know, okay, well, you know, say an attorney you're working with, well, we deposed this person and that person for the other side. Watch this and let me know if you find any inconsistencies. Have you seen that?
Oh, yes. In fact, I get sent many depositions to read over and, you know, see if the person who gave the deposition knew what they were talking about or not.
Right.
And you'll find a lot of, not a lot, but there are nurses out there that they absolutely know nothing about what they were doing. They blindly followed the doctor's orders. Now, the doctors are the, you know, the people who write the orders.
Right.
But as a nurse, my thing is, if he writes an order and I have questions about that order, then I'm going to call him up and question him. I had a doctor one time, big cardiac surgeon in Birmingham, Alabama, who came up. I worked at a university teaching hospital. He came up with a resident and he said, well, we need to send this guy home. I was sitting there charting on a chart. And he goes and he says, we need to send this guy home this evening. And I stood up and I said, "Excuse me, but that's my patient." And I said, "He can't be sent home this evening." And I told the doctor, "Okay, here's what went on today." And he says, "Well, did you call, his resident, Dr. Jones, over here?" And I said, "Yes, sir, he knew about it." Well, the surgeon turns around and looked at Dr. Jones and said, "Did you know this went on today?" And he said, "Well, yes, sir." And the big whopping cardiologist said, "Well, let's go look at this guy."
Right.
And when they came back out to the desk, I was sitting there and he said, "Miss Condon, you were exactly right. This guy can't go home today."
Right. Wow.
And so, I mean, they were going to send him home at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right.
And this guy wasn't ready to be discharged. He still had medical things going on that I'm just like, no.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So catching some of that stuff is another thing that falls into your scope of what you do. Another question coming from Frank in Wilmington, Delaware. Have you ever been involved in or dealt with a case where the person has a do not resuscitate on their file, and have doctors been sued for not following directions?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have not had that happen in any cases I've reviewed, but there are lots of cases on the book that talk about patients who had do not resuscitate or a DNR order.
Right.
That's what they expressly told the doctor, and a lot of times they'll tell the nurse what they want.
Right.
And the doctor, says, "Well, we're going to resuscitate them. Something happens. Well, we need to resuscitate them." And I'm like, "No, they have a DNR order."
Right.
And the doctor may decide, "Well, I don't care what they have. We need to do this."
Right.
Or the other thing is, a lot of times the family's standing there when mama starts going down the tubes, and they're like, "Oh, aren't you doing something?" And I'll say, "Well, your mother has a do not resuscitate order on the chart. I don't care what she wants.
Right.
I want to resuscitate it. I want you to do everything possible." And I mean, they just get angry.
Right.
And I'm like, "I'll go call Dr. Ed about that because you'll need to talk to him about that."
Right. Yeah, that's a tough position to be in.
Yes, it is. It's a tough position for anybody. The nurse sort of gets in the middle of the doctor and the family.
Right.
In that case.
But it's a tough position also because now, where you explain where a doctor's like, "I don't care what it says here, we're going to resuscitate." It's almost like the emotions, their personal emotions are getting involved. Right?
Yes, yes. When I was much younger, my grandmother had a doctor who did not believe in letting do not resuscitate orders, and he told people up front, and we knew that at the hospital. And when my grandmother had a massive stroke and they took her to the hospital. It was an intensive care unit, and luckily it was the hospital I worked at. The nurse that took care of my grandmother knew me, and we had discussed this doctor and my grandmother's wishes, which I knew she didn't want to be resuscitated.
Right.
And she had said that many, many times. And so we had talked about that. Well, when they brought her in, my friend recognized that that was my grandmother. And luckily, the doctor was out of town. He had somebody covering for him.
Right.
Well, he told the doctor that was covering, he says, "I know this lady's granddaughter."
Right.
And she said her grandmother wants a do not resuscitate order, and said she's expressed that many times. Well, this is way back in the early 80s.
Right.
Before we got into all this HIPAA, ruling.
Right.
And so the doctor said, I totally agree with that.
Right.
So they did not resuscitate my grandmother, thank goodness. Right. They kept her comfortable till she passed away.
Right. Now, have there been any cases where you've been asked to get involved? Maybe there's an attorney going, "You know what? Yeah, there was a DNR, but it was not the right time," or, it was just in case she was, beyond, you know, maybe it was for a disease, but this was just, for some reason, she just stopped breathing. Like they couldn't figure it out.
Well,
because I know you know, because I know when people get older,
right?
They don't want, you know, if I'm 85 years old, don't be cracking my chest open trying to save me. Just kind of let me go. But if I'm 50 and I have a DNR thinking I want that for later in life, you know what I mean?
Well, that's the one thing. If you're 50 and you really want to save that DNR for later in life, don't ever write it down anywhere. Okay. Because as healthcare professionals, we're obliged to follow your orders.
Right.
And you're, say, 52 years old and you've been in a wreck that you're dying. You know, it was a tragic wreck.
Right.
Well, if you've got this DNR order that you said, I want it later in life, well, what's later in life? You know, for you, 52 may be later in life. For me, it's going to be 92. So, yeah, don't ever write anything like that down thinking you want it later in life. And that's something I encourage people to do, is discuss these issues with your spouse.
Right.
Or whoever, you know, you think will be there if something happens to you. What do you want done?
Right.
My sister and I have discussed this, you know, between the two of us, because, you know, there's going to come a day that something may happen, and my husband is not going to be in any kind of emotional state to make those decisions. Right. So my sister's going to need to be there to help him make those decisions.
In other words, to
pull the plug.
So to speak?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Because you have to look at what's the quality of life of this person's going to be,
right?
You know, if they recover from all of this.
Right. Yeah, and especially what if you just, you know, you were having fun at a party or or on a boat, you fell off, got a little water in the lungs, you drowned, and you've got that DNR, and the doctor's like, nope, you can't do anything.
Right.
When all you had to do is a little that, and all of a sudden they're fine. They're like, whew, I almost thought I was gone there. Yeah. That could be an issue.
Yeah, that could. Yeah, that could be an issue.
All right, I'm going to need a pen to write this down. No DNR yet. Wait till much later to put it in writing.
Well, like I say, yeah, make sure you don't put anything like that in writing if you want them. If you're still young, you got your kids.
Yeah.
You want to see your kids grow up and have kids so you can have grandkids.
Yeah, just get out the paddles and clear.
Yeah.
Get me back.
Right, exactly.
All right, let's see. Our next question for you, Kathie, comes from Sandra H. in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Would someone like you be considered an expert witness, and has anyone ever challenged your findings? It's an interesting question, because I'm sure you've worked over the course of many years that you've been doing this. You probably worked in a bunch of cases where, you know, other medical experts have been involved on the other side as well, right?
Right. In fact, I was an expert witness not too long ago in a case in Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Oh, really?
And the opposing counsel, as we call the other side, he was questioning me about, you know, what I read in the chart.
Right.
And I told him what I saw in the chart, and he said, well, does that apply to Mr. Jones over here? And I said, well, it was his chart, and yes, it does apply to him. I said, I wasn't there to chart on him, so whatever the physician or nurse wrote, that's, you know, what applies to Mr. Jones.
Right.
Well, he challenged everything, almost everything I said, trying to catch me in a trap, is what I finally figured out. Well, he asked all these questions, and then he sat down, and the attorney that had hired me gets up, and he starts asking me lots of questions.
Right.
Because we had already discussed the case. He knew what my findings were on the case. So he asked me questions that supported what he said was, you know, Mr. Jones's issues.
So he got to redirect.
Right. Yeah.
See, I know my terms.
Yeah. Well, then the opposing counsel gets to ask questions again. They get
to cross-examine.
Yes, to cross-examine.
I told you. I watch a lot of TV casts.
But so he gets back up and he starts questioning me again. And, you know, my thing is, once I've said something, I very rarely am going to take it back.
Right.
I think I changed my mind.
Right.
And he asked me all the same questions, and I kept telling him Okay, here in the chart, and he had the chart up on a monitor.
Oh, so everybody could see it.
Yes.
Okay.
And so he's flipping through the chart, and he says, "Go to page such and such," and he had given me a printed copy of the chart.
This sounds exciting. I feel like I'm watching TV right now, listening to this story here, Kathie.
So we flipped through the chart, and he says, "Well, what does that say? What does that mean right there where you see me, where I've highlighted it here?" And I looked at it, and I said, "Well, that means X, Y, and Z."
Right.
And so then he goes and he asks me again, except he turned the question around. And I said, "Well, I said that means ABC." And he's like, "Oh," and of course then my attorney's jumping up going, "You've asked her that already. She's answered that question. Let's move on." Yeah. So, yeah, I do. Opposing counsel is really, they will challenge anything they can about what your testimony is.
It almost sounds like you had fun. Did you have fun with that?
Yes, I do. I do have fun with attorneys because they want to catch you in a trap.
Right.
The thing of it is, I'm a nurse. I know nursing. I know how to take care of patients.
Right.
I know what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done. And so the thing of it is, I'm going to tell you how it's supposed to go down, and if you're in a hospital or a doctor's office or wherever.
Right.
And, you know, don't try to catch me in a trap because I'll see it. and I'm going to make you put your foot in it, not mine.
You seem like the ornery type.
Yes, I can be ornery. Yes, yes. So, yeah, they do try to get you, but like I say, yeah, I have been an expert witness.
Right. Yeah, and that's very interesting stuff. Again, we're talking with our guest, Kathie Condon. She's the owner of Condon Medical Legal Consultants. I know from the name you're like, well, what does all that mean? It's very intricate. No, it's not. She's actually she's the person that goes in between the lawyers and well, I guess the lawyers and the medical community,
medical
right?
Field, yes.
You're tying everything together.
Right.
You're making it so a lawyer can understand what a doctor wrote, what a nurse wrote, what kind of care was given, what the ramifications of that care were, and if that lawyer who's looking to recover damages for their client against a hospital or doctor actually has a case, or if maybe they don't have a case.
Right, yeah. It costs a lot of money for an attorney to put a case on. And of course, you know, if you watch these commercials on TV, these people, I was injured in an accident, but Joe Blow, attorney at law, got me $150,000. Well, what you don't realize is out of that $150,000, the lawyer gets paid.
Right.
He has to pay for all the records that he got. There's time on the phone. There's my fees because I don't work for free.
No, nobody does.
Yeah, exactly. I don't work for free. So, you know, they're not getting $150,000.
Right.
I mean, that was what was awarded, but what they actually get can be, you know, maybe 2/3, or actually it's a half or less a lot of times.
After all those expenses, it ends up being half. Right.
Yes.
So attorneys, you know, of course, they're looking to, you know, get the most for their client because it also means the most for them.
Right, exactly.
You know, and one of the big things is, okay, is this going to be my you know, worth the time of me, my assistants, my firm? You know, is this gonna be a winner or a loser when they get to court? Because that's the bottom line.
Yes, that is the bottom line.
Right. And if you're an attorney that's looking for somebody to do that for you, you know, the medical angle, working out, you know, in your cases, putting together everything so you can understand it, so you can make your case to the jury, make your case to the judge, whoever it is, and get the resolution that you and your client feel you're entitled to, reach out to Kathie. She can help you with that. Condon Medical Legal Consultants, that's the name of her company. You can find them online, cmlc.co. That's the website, cmlc.co, or give her a call directly, 205-908-3289. And again, Kathie Condon, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Rick. I enjoyed being here and answering questions.
And it's always a good time. And I always feel like I'm learning something new, so thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So.
All right.